It's a delight to be here tonight and actually see this room full of people. As following in the way of my teacher, probably many of you have been to her talks here. She's talked here a couple of times a year. I don't know. Her first talk, I love to tell this story. Venerable Chodron's first talk at North Idaho College was in 2002, before the idea that Sravasti Abbey would be in this neighborhood was in her mind. She had she'd gone to establish a monastery in St. Louis, and that didn't work out. And then some students in Boise said, please come to Boise, we'll find land, we'll support you. And they didn't ever find a place. And then through a whole series of interdependent causes, which I won't go into the great details of now, but she was staying with our friends in Cataldo, as you know, just 20, 30 minutes east of here. And I invited her to teach. I was new in town. I didn't know anybody. Chris and Dwight were involved. Don and Dana were involved. Susan, of course, was involved. Anyway, she started teaching in the library, over in the lecture hall at Molstead Library. And we had no idea who would come. It was 2002. Who knew? They had done the CDA Press did an interview with her, and she got some interesting mail from that. It's the first time that there had been a Buddhist, I think, besides Tom Flint, who was at school here, who was public in this town, maybe ever. By golly, we opened the doors and people started coming, and they came, and they came, and they came, and they came. Finally, the lecture hall was completely full. An administrator from the school was there and said, you can't let any more people in. But more people were coming. And we said, we have to. So in the end, they opened up the library so that she could speak, and that would hold all the people who came. So 120 people came to that first talk. From Spokane, they came from all over. And at the end of the talk, I don't know, maybe that night, maybe the next day, she said, let's look for land around here. So North Idaho College has a very important place, actually, in the whole history of how Sravasti Abbey Buddhist Monastery came to be a part of this region. So it's quite an honor to be here and be in this seat in her place. She was originally scheduled to give this talk, as usual, and she was invited actually to Taiwan to have a very important honorary role in an ordination ceremony. Very, I would say impossibly rare for a Western Buddhist nun to be invited to have that role in the Chinese ceremony. So of course we said go. And so I got to be the person filling the seat. So in her style, let's first do some meditation together, if you don't mind. Feel the space, be in the space, feel each other. So put your feet flat on the floor. If you can sit a little forward in your chair so that your spine is holding you up, that's the best. If that's not possible, okay, fine. Lips closed. If you can breathe through your nose, that's good. If you can't, okay, fine. Eyes lowered. And we'll just spend a few moments, first in the silence, being aware of yourself in the space. How it feels to sit in the chair, be in this room. Just notice. And then bring your attention inside your own body, inside yourself. And then bring your attention to your breathing. Notice how it feels to breathe. Notice this thin thread that keeps you alive, breath by breath. Spend some time really observing, letting your mind rest on the breath. And if you notice that your mind has wandered off for any good reason or bad one, just simply bring it back to the breath as soon as you notice. And then let's set a motivation for our time together tonight. As we notice our breathing, you can also be aware that we're all breathing the same air. To some extent, what was in you is in me. What's in the person next to you is in you. All breathing the same air in and out. So at a subtle level, but a very real one, we are connected. And not just here in this room, really. Throughout this city, throughout this region, throughout this country, and even this world. Every day, I think through the internet, we see that our interconnection is more and more vivid, clearer. And what we say and what we think, even what we do, matters. Matters to the people immediately around us. It matters to the larger community in which we live. And it really matters in the world. So as we share some time together tonight exploring this idea of belonging or this idea of connection, let's hold in mind that what we're doing here matters, not just to us, but really to all beings everywhere. That the purpose for being here becomes much bigger. And we can rejoice, we can be joyful about having a positive effect if we set our intention to do so. So let's do that. It's a cute little bell. There we go. Can you hear it? Okay, good. And can you hear me? I don't have a monitor, so it's a little bit... Okay, good. Good. Well, a few resources for tonight. Connection, no. Belonging, the connection we all need. That's the topic, right? So I inherited this topic. It was chosen when we thought Venerable Chödrön was going to speak. And so I took it on, sure, no problem. And then as I began to think about it, I thought, I wouldn't have picked this topic. But the more I've thought about it over the last weeks, and I've read the Cardinal Reed's book, Tribe, that's really what it's based on, the more I've come to realize that actually it's been a big topic in my life. I've spent a fair amount of time wondering whether I belong in certain places. And I will also say within the last probably, I don't know, at least for sure in the last 10 years, I've come to some conclusions that I do belong. So in a way I have some experience that I didn't realize that I had. But I think that question is pretty universal. You tell me. Do I belong here? You ever had that thought? Do I really belong here? As I said, I lived in Coeur d'Alene before I moved to the monastery, and with my business partner, Susan, we had a kind of an esoteric business. And I don't know if it was probably more me than anybody, but I was pretty intent that we should be members of this Coeur d'Alene Chamber of Commerce. And so we joined, and for years, we went to those breakfast meetings once a month with our little esoteric business. And I don't think I ever went to that resort and sat in that Chamber of Commerce meeting without thinking, do I belong here? Ever. Today I would say yes. Sure, I belong here. But at that time, the question was kind of fuzzy in my mind. So, sometimes we have this question. I mean, for sure, if you are the racial or ethnic minority in the room, you may have the question, do I belong here? If you're the religious minority or the language minority in any situation, the question may come up, do I belong here? Gender identity that's different from the majority of the people sitting in the room with you. You think, do I belong here? But we also have that question even in the most intimate settings, even in our family. Do you ever have that thought about your family? Do I belong here? Even on the planet sometimes, some people really have this question, do I belong here? How did I get here? Do I belong on this earth? So it's a very interesting question to pursue. What is this question of belonging? Psychologists and sociologists do agree that there really is a fundamental human need to belong. And then, there's the romantic belonging. You belong to me. That doesn't last very long, does it? It's sweet, but... and then there can be kind of an aggressive belonging. You belong to me, babe, right? I mean, there's a quality of that, but that's not what we're talking about. Belonging is an affinity for a place or a situation. That's not what we're talking about either, really. What we're talking about is belongingness. That's the official term. I had never heard it before. But belongingness is a human emotional need to be an accepted member of a group. Does that register? Yeah. Whether it's family, friends, coworkers, a religion, or something else, people tend to have an innate desire to belong and to be an important part of something greater than themselves. Agree? Yes? I think it's universal. I think it's universal. The need to belong is the need to give and receive attention to and from others. To give and receive attention. Belonging is a strong and inevitable feeling that exists in human nature. So, if that's true, how come we have this question, do I belong here? That's what I've been playing with over the time. How many people have read this book, The Tribe, by Sebastian Junger? Just a few. It's very interesting. Since not so many people have read it, I won't go into it a whole lot, but he's a journalist. He has covered a lot of combat in Afghanistan and other places. I can't remember where all else. But his premise really is that, he starts with an interesting premise, and that is that even at the time, early part of this country, when the European settlers were still coming, and there was a great war, many combats with the native people here about whose land it was, that during those times, sometimes European settlers would be taken as prisoners or sometimes enslaved with the tribes, right? But then at some point they would either be released or they would be freed or they would escape. And there was a phenomenon commented on quite a lot in that period of once people had left the Indian tribes, going back. Have you heard this before? Going back. Yeah. Why, he wanted to know. What is it? So he started looking at all of these, to me a little bit loosely connected, but all these occasions where human beings come together to support one another, to do this very thing, to give and receive attention from each other. To be a part of something greater than themselves, as this definition says. That the tribal life they experienced with the Native Americans in this country gave them that feeling. That's a supposition. He talks about how in times of crisis, in times of war, when civilians are being bombed, that they come together in a way that we do not do in ordinary daily life. When we have natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, major storms, and people are in trouble, human beings support and help each other. They don't ask, who are you? They don't ask where you came from. They don't ask what neighborhood do you live in? What do you look like? Who is your mama? How much money you have? They dig through the rubble and they find the voice of the person that they can hear down there. And then, when things get back to normal, we go back to our stratified way of being. So it's very interesting, his approach. I want to share something with you, and I want to do an experiment here that I think will inform our whole evening. This is his introduction, and it's, I think, the driving force for this whole book. He talks about growing up as a kind of middle-class guy in the East Coast somewhere, and wanting adventure and wanting to be involved. And, he's a young man on a quest, right? The way to quest in the 80s, stick out your thumb and hitchhike across the United States. So he does. And on a town outside of Gillette, Wyoming, one morning in late October 1986, he has his backpack, he's standing on the freeway, he's got his thumb out. He has his tent, he has his sleeping bag, he has his cooking utensils, and he has a week's worth of food. Standing there one morning, I saw a man walking toward me up the on-ramp from town. From a distance, I could see that he wore a quilted old canvas union suit and carried a black lunchbox. His hair was wild and matted, and his union suit was shiny with filth and grease at the thighs. He didn't look unkindly, but I was alone. And I was young. And I watched him like a hawk. So he came up to him, he says, "Where are you headed?" "California," I said. "How much food do you got?" he asked. Well, he had plenty of food. But he was worried and he didn't want to get robbed. And he said, "Oh, I just got a little cheese." I lied. The man shook his head. "You can't get to California on just a little cheese. You need more than that." The man said that he lived in a broken-down car and that every morning he walked 3 miles to a coal mine outside of town to see if they needed fill-in work. Some days they did, some days they didn't. And this was one of the days when they didn't. "So," he said, "I won't be needing this." He opened his black lunchbox and he said, "I saw you from town and just wanted to make sure you were okay." The lunchbox contained a bologna sandwich, an apple, and a bag of chips. The man gave him all his food. Then he turned and made his way back down the on-ramp towards Gillette, Wyoming. He said, "I thought about that man for the rest of my trip. I've thought about that man for the rest of my life." See, lots of people are generous, but with the fact that he had taken responsibility for me, that's what made the difference. And that was his driving force behind writing this book. This thing about taking responsibility for me. But as I thought about this, I want to do an experiment, if you guys will think for a minute. Have you not had an experience like this in your life? Somewhere, sometime in your life, has someone unexpectedly helped you out of the blue, completely out of the blue. Anybody not had an experience like that? Could be a stranger, could be family. Has everybody got a story? What I'd like to do is take a minute to tell your story. You up for this? Yeah. Now, here's my idea. To turn to a person next to you, whether you know them or not. If it's more comfortable to tell somebody no, it's okay, it doesn't matter. We'll just take 3 minutes. But the person to the left, tell your story. You have to summarize because you only have 3 minutes. But just tell the story. Then I'll ring the bell and listen. And the other person, just listen. Don't interrupt, don't ask questions, just listen. Really, really hear what they have to say. Then I'll ring the bell, we'll switch, the other person will tell that story. And we'll just share for a minute. Willing? Okay? Got enough of a story to tell? Okay. Find your partner. Okay, 3 minutes. So think for another minute. We're not going to share this one, but in light of the stories you just heard, and in light of this idea that someone just helped out of the blue, think of a time when you have done that for someone else. My bet is everybody in this room has been that too. True? Yeah, yeah. You guys haven't even lived that long and you have that experience, right? Yeah. What do you think the motive was? Why did that person help you? And why did you help the person you helped? Just throw out the ideas. Kindness. Being helpful. Knowing what it's like to be in that situation, so a sense of recognition, of familiarity, and yeah. Fellow human beings.
Being courteous.
Being courteous.
Breath of God.
Pardon?
Breath of God.
Breath of God. Nice.
Penance. Penance.
Penance. Yeah. Yeah, also a motivation. What? Love for others. Empathy. Compassion. Kindness.
Fulfilling an idea.
Happiness.
Fulfilling an idea? Is that what you said? Yeah. And what did you say here on the front row?
Spreading kindness.
Spreading kindness. Yeah. And somebody in the back? No? Stranger in a strange land, we should treat other people like that. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Yeah. It doesn't matter what philosophy it comes in. You know? That innate wish to benefit others is a part of who we are. It's not exactly what we are told by some scientific points of view and some sociological points of view. No, there's been a lot of, Thupten Jinpa says in his book, I'm going to really go for these books here. A Fearless Heart by Thupten Jinpa, who is is still a translator, principal translator for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He's developed a compassion-based program for Stanford University that's a secular program using Buddhist ideas for how to cultivate compassion in society. He talks about how as he was a Buddhist monk for a long time, and then he went to Cambridge, got degrees at Oxford, and how he had constant debates with all the scholars there who were immersed, who were just steeped in the idea that all human beings are driven by competition. And that, you know, the get ahead, everybody, the top dog needs to be the top dog, everybody's out for each other's throat, is the way human beings are. And Jinpa, raised in a Buddhist context where he spent, you know, all these many, many years studying from the point of view that says, no, we're fundamentally kind. And this thing that wants to harm others is really just an adventitious thing. It happens to us. It's not to say that it doesn't exist. It does. But it's not the nature of who we are. So he's quite thrilled that science, sociology, neuroscience these days is proving that, in fact, this innate sense of kindness is who we are. And in his own way, I think Younger spends a lot of time in this book trying to prove the same point. This thing about they took responsibility for me. The people who helped us out of the blue, somehow they took a sense of responsibility for me. Maybe they knew me, maybe they didn't. But my welfare was important enough to them for them to go out of their way, sometimes at great cost, to do something for another human being. Why? Kindness, empathy, breath of God, wanting to care for another living being. It's a part of who we are. Right? So then the question becomes, why can't we remember this? Right? Is anybody in the age group that would know this? I found a hot song when I was doing some research on this. 2018 release from One Republic, a song called Connection. These days, my waves get lost in the oceans. 7 billion swimmers, man, I'm going through the motions. Send up a flare, I need love and devotion. Traded for some faces that I never know. Notion, maybe I should try to find the old me. Take me to the places and the people that know me. Trying to just connect, thinking maybe you could show me. If there's so many people here, then why am I so lonely? Can I get a connection? Can I get a connection? Can I get a connection? Why are we so lonely? We have an epidemic of loneliness in this country. They're calling it now a public health issue. Have you heard this? Senator Ben Sasse, Republican from Nebraska, put out a book last fall called Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal. The nation's most discussed political problem is entangled with the least understood public health problem, he said. The political problem is furious partisanship. Yes. The public health problem is loneliness. There is a growing consensus that loneliness, not obesity, cancer, or heart disease, is the nation's #1 health crisis. Wow. 330 million people. Why am I so lonely? Right? In Junpa's book, he says the University of Chicago tracked more than 2,000 people over the age of 50 for a period of 6 years and found that extreme loneliness is twice as likely to cause death among the elderly as obesity and high blood pressure. Did you get what I just said? Extreme loneliness is twice as likely to cause death among the elderly as obesity and high blood pressure. Research demonstrates that loneliness is as physically dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day and contributes to cognitive decline, including more rapid advance of Alzheimer's disease. We are a depressed people. The more urban, the more wealthy, especially wealthy women, the more depressed we are. It's in this book somewhere with the stats. Suicide rates are climbing. Nearly 45,000 suicides occurred in the U.S. in 2016, more than twice the number of homicides, making it the leading cause of death. Among people aged 15 to 34, suicide is the second leading cause of death. So what's going on? I mean, there's a big gap between our loneliness epidemic and, we can call it loneliness epidemic on that scale, extreme loneliness. But I would say even our questioning, do I belong here, is the seed of that. Wherever that question comes up is the seed of that. So the thing I want to look at a little bit is what's the gap between our experience of complete strangers who are kind to me, or I'm willing to be kind to complete strangers, and this feeling, this sense, or this inability to connect with other people. It's a problem. And it's really sad. And I would bet, too, everyone in this room has had an experience of feeling deeply, deeply lonely. So it's not like we don't know how it feels. We do. So maybe there's a link between our widespread loneliness and this idea. Really, I think sociologists peg it to the beginning of, the 17th, 18th centuries, the beginning of the Age of Reason, or what's called the Enlightenment period, when science and reasonableness began to overcome our sense of religious. I don't want to put too much on religion, but our sense of family, our sense of connectedness, when people began to leave home, when fathers began to go out and have to work in factories rather than, being on the land and working with others. So this separation started about then. This idea that we are independent beings, that we are driven by an external drive, that the success, our value as a human being is measured in terms of our net worth, or measured in terms of what we produce in the world, how creative we are, how attractive we are, how rich we are. That whole view separates us from each other because it does feed the competition, right? And especially since the time of looking at evolution, how many people don't know the phrase survival of the fittest? I don't know when we learn it. 3rd grade, 2nd grade? Whether we believe it or not then, it's still a part of our psyche, right? I've read that even Darwin said, not just His Holiness the Dalai Lama, that the survival also is dependent on those who cooperate. But that's not what gets into the popular culture. It's this competition thing. So as we look at this whole situation of the gap between our experience of connection, and our experience of loneliness, and our experience of separation, and we look at how it's affected our world today, it's really, I think, useful to spend some time thinking about what can we do to make a difference in our own lives. What can we do to pull ourselves out of this belief in our separation from others? And then what can we do to reach out? Whether we're naturally shy or naturally extroverted, what can we do to intentionally connect, reconnect, understand that we actually are connected? That's kind of the paradox, right? We are connected. We do belong. By being born, we belong. By being present in any situation, we belong. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in that situation. I mean, we belong. So where is the gap? Is it internal or is it external? Is it that I allow you to tell me whether I belong or not? Or is it that I come in knowing that I belong? I'm not even going to try to answer that, but I think it's a very, very important question. My teacher tells a story about an exercise she did once where she was at a program of, seems like it was a month-long program. There were about 100 people there. And she set herself the task Before this month is over, I will have a meaningful conversation with every single person here. It was her homework. And she did. No matter who they were, no matter what kind of differences they did, and some people she had history with. But with one by one by one by one, she made herself go have a conversation with every person there. And her experience was that it was one of the most fulfilling, delightful times. Delightful way to spend a month. All she needed was the assignment to reach out and to take the responsibility to be the first one to reach out. So it's this idea of responsibility again. To take responsibility for reaching out to one another. In a way, it's not that hard. How hard was it to tell your story here? Easy? Difficult? Painful? No? Not easy, not hard. It was easy. It was easy. So we come into the situation thinking that we're different. We come into the situation thinking that we're separate. We come into the situation thinking that we need to be on guard because we're going to get hurt. You know, somebody's going to mess us up. Somebody's going to mess with us. Then automatically the barrier is up. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who I take as a role model, not that I am anywhere near the model, but the way he moves in the world is that he says again and again and again, every single human being is my brother or my sister. He believes that. It's where he comes from. He says, my practice whenever I see a person is to smile. And he says, not a diplomatic smile, not a sarcastic smile, a genuine smile. Even that alone as a practice, I'm going to start throwing out practices here. It's worth experimenting with. Just to give yourself a little job, 7 days, 1 day, do it 1 day. Today, I will smile at everyone I see and see what happens. It's a way of opening the door. It's a way of reaching out, whether we feel like smiling or not. But once we do, I looked this up recently, it's really true. When the corners of your mouth go up, physiologically, whether you have the feeling in your heart or not, it releases all these bliss things in your brain. It does. And one of the things that His Holiness uses as an example of a proof that human beings are basically kind by nature is the fact that we respond to smile. In fact, I saw a study too, where they can't resist it. If someone is smiling at you, that they had the experiment was that they had people smiling, and they told the people on the other side, frown. They couldn't do it. They couldn't sustain it. Someone genuinely smiling at you, you cannot hold that frown for long. It's an interesting phenomenon. Right? So, there's quite a few things in the Tibetan tradition that are useful, that they've been using in this secular training, that helps us. I think I talked about this last time I was here, actually, but it's so important for us to begin to notice the kindness around us. We're actually steeped in kindness. It's so ordinary that we don't notice. But really, what's happening day after day after day is people are being kind to each other. The anomaly is when we're not, and that's newsworthy. And then we read that, we freak out, and we get depressed, or scared, or, reasonably so. But if we look closely around us, kindness is the activity that's happening most of the day. Parents are raising their children mostly kindly. Children are learning the term empathy and using it in their schools, right? Yeah, amazing. Healthcare people are taking care of sick people all the time. Neighbors are knocking on the door to check on their neighbors all day, every day. So an exercise really to begin to pay attention to the kindness that is around us changes our view. Another book I want to promote is by my teacher and also Tibetans Children, and also by Dr. Russell Colts, who's a psychologist in Spokane, who does compassion-based therapy. It's called An Open-Hearted Life, and it's a little guidebook, really, from a psychological and also Buddhist point of view of how to cultivate kindness in our lives. And one of the exercises is to be aware, pay attention to the kindness that's happening all around us, the kindness we've experienced in our life. So we, in the class, we worked, one chapter after chapter. We worked on this book for 2 years. We went really slowly. And I remember one night a woman came into class, and we were looking at kindness. And she had a story. She said, I was just driving here, and I was stopped at this light at, I guess it was Northwest and Madison or someplace, big intersection. And she said there was a very elderly person alone, woman with a walker, I think, walking across the street. And she was going so slowly that the light changed before she was a quarter way across. Every single car at the 4 cross waited until she was completely across the street before they drove. She was in tears. She said, what I noticed is that this happens all the time and I never noticed. This happens all the time, this kindness, and I'm too busy to see it. And this, I believe, is the key for us to begin to know that we belong. I am certain of, 4 lanes of traffic there. Probably most of the people there didn't think, oh, that was an act of kindness. They didn't notice either. But it was. It was an instinctive, innate, thoughtful response. Let this woman cross the road. So we have to slow down enough. We have to take the time enough to look at one another and to really see how much living beings care for each other. We also, I think, need to take the time to connect with ourselves. You know, if 10 minutes a day, His Holiness talks a lot about mental hygiene. You know, we're all great on physical hygiene. We know how to brush our teeth. We learn that before you can hardly walk. We all, take showers often enough. But mental hygiene, we're not so good at. And what he means is paying attention to what we put in our minds. Paying attention to how our minds go. Taking the time each day, 10 minutes in the morning, to think about, what's my purpose today? How do I want to be in the world today? Because no matter what we do, no matter what we do for a living, no matter what our jobs are, no matter what our volunteer work is, no matter how we spend our days, human beings need to be needed. And we're doing something that benefits others. I don't care if you're the copy clerk at Kinko's, doesn't exist anymore, does it? Staples, FedEx. That's a benefit to other people. You know, if you're changing people's tires, it's a huge benefit to other people. If you're sending out the hospital bills, it's a benefit to other people. And we can go to work or spend our day thinking, today my work will be of benefit to others. That's my mission. We can think, today I will practice kindness, no matter what else comes. We can think, today I will notice kindness. And when I do that, I will really rejoice when I see it. And when we do that, our mind is a whole lot happier. When we do that, I contend that our connection with other living beings becomes much clearer and cleaner. And when we have that sense in ourselves, then we have enough inner resource to reach out to the people that we know are not having that kind of day and help. I don't mean fix. I mean reach out and smile and say, hey, I'm here. You're not alone. I really recommend this book. It really makes you think. I don't agree with everything he said, but it really has made me think. Thupten Jinpa, A Fearless Heart. He talks a lot about the science that proves the value of kindness, that proves the innate kind nature of living beings, human beings, and how we can help each other and how to develop that. And then An Open-Hearted Life is like a little guidebook for developing a daily practice, changing our mind, changing the way we think, which makes us happier people ourselves and then gives us more resources to benefit other people. Then the question no longer becomes, do I belong here? If my mission, like it was for Venerable Children, is to walk in this room and be a benefit to everybody in here, then I have a job that's bigger than myself. And I have a reason to reach out. So we can all adapt that. I fear, well, I don't know, I don't fear, it's a conjecture really. This thing about disasters bringing people together. Our climate may just make us prove that. We may have a chance to see it in action. May not happen in my lifetime, but it will happen in a lot of yours. But I also think we have the possibility as individuals, every single one of us actually has a field of influence that is bigger than we think. And everybody in this room, I think, has the inclination, or you wouldn't be here, even if you're here for extra credit. You know, some of you are, but you still didn't have to come. So if you come to a talk called Belonging, the connection we all need, the inclination is already there. Either the need or the inclination to, or both. Right? So there's a lot of power in this room to think about kindness in ourselves, the kindness that we've experienced in our lives, to cultivate a heart of gratitude. Let that be the motivating force for our life, and to reach out and offer that kindness to others. And that way, demonstrating how we all belong. Make sense? Okay, there's time for little questions and comments.
Thank you so much
Yeah.
for your talk. I definitely, these are questions I think about every single day. Belongingness and connection. And I was quite moved by the book Tribe, and that's part of what started sparking these questions in me. And I'm just wondering what you did disagree with his text.
Well, I will tell you. There was a lot about the camaraderie of war, which I can't disagree with, and it's not an experience I have. I haven't been in the military. But I have been in theater, and I know that there's a quality of connection that happens when those people are working all together. We have post-show depression. You know, you're so intense on something for a while, and then it's over. You have that post-show depression. I've done it with choral music. Voices together with a single goal, doing something magnificent. Of course, it doesn't last very long. So that so much emphasis is put on the war experience. That is his experience. But I thought, there are other ways to get this feeling of connection with people together, working towards a big cause, than war. So, that was part of my thing.
Well, he wrote about what he...
Yeah, he wrote about what he knew. So maybe it wasn't a disagreement so much as it was just an experience where I thought, gosh. And he says in here, I think he says clearly, war cannot be the thing that brings people together. But yeah. But very, very, very evocative, provocative stuff. Yeah.
What role do you think that environments play in feeling that you have a sense of connectedness or loneliness? I think about employers that actually have, more like potlucks. They have that type of social element, or living communities where they have public parks and people can come together. And then I think about places where it literally puts you in isolation, and where you don't have communication with one another.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And this first definition of belonging is about place. It's not about people. It's about place, which I think is interesting. And I also believe, and I think it's harder, but I do believe if somebody in a place of isolation, where there is that sense of isolation, say a workplace that's not so comfortable, can connect with the other people around, it changes the climate. It does. One person really can change the climate. It's also, sometimes you have to leave. This is also true. Because, and I should have brought this up, we can't do it at the expense of our own connection with ourselves. We have to have the resource ourselves to be able to give to others. It doesn't mean, it's well known that people who live in poverty are far more generous than people who live in wealth, right? Well known. So it's not that you need to have a lot to give, but you need to have a sense, you need to know that yourself is taken care of. You don't give at your own expense. Get what I mean? Yeah. So anyway, yes, I think the place makes a difference. So we live in beautiful towns. We live in beautiful places if we can. And yet people still care for each other in pretty grim places. Prisons. Oh my gosh. We do a lot of work with prison inmates who are, you know, they're there for a reason, but they want to change their lives and they want their lives to be meaningful. And I've done a few prison visits where one guy, it's mostly always men that we visit, one guy can make the commitment that I am going to practice loving compassion in this place if it kills me. And they change the way they live. It's amazing. It's amazing what they do. Some of them are better practitioners than I am. I will tell you. So it's not the only thing.
Could you speak to the issue of low self-esteem in our Western culture that the Dalai Lama talks about? Because that could also have to do with the loneliness issue.
Yeah, I think it's true, Ken. What Ken's referring to is that many years ago, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been having these science conferences, mind life conferences with scientists now for 20, 30 years even. But very early on, there was one on psychology. He was with a huge group of psychologists, and somebody brought up this idea of low self-esteem, and His Holiness was like, what? What? He didn't get it. There was no... You people don't like yourselves? Self-hate came up. He was baffled. And he was with, of course, a group of extremely successful psychologists, right? And people in that field. And he went around the room. He said, do you have it? Yes. 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 It's like, what? So it's interesting to know that not every human being in the world doesn't have low self-esteem. Every human being in the world does not have low self-esteem, but pretty much every human being around here does, around here in our country. True? True. True, 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 true. Am I good enough? Am I worthy enough? Am I worthy? Am I worthy? So there are a lot of conjectures about why that is. You know, if you come into the world and know that from the beginning you're flawed, then doomed to hell. I mean, it's kind of a scary way to live. Not everybody holds that view, but there is a punishment kind of reward system by which we live that's not necessarily the way the whole world runs. So we're trying to measure up. But that too is curable, I think. Or tameable, let's put it that way, by reflecting on the kindness that we've experienced and reflecting on our value and rejoicing when we are of benefit to others. It makes a huge difference. Makes a huge difference. We receive teachings from a very brilliant scholar who's done a tremendous amount. I don't know how many books he's published, but he had, what's the tick disease called? Yes, Lyme disease. Went through a period where he got so sick he nearly died and couldn't think. Brilliant scholar, couldn't think. And the conclusion he came to was like, okay, if this is how it is, then at least I can be a nice guy. That will still make my life worthwhile. I thought, wow, if we had the confidence to just think, at least I can be a nice guy, no matter what else I do, wouldn't life be easier? He was able to recover. his mental capacity, but it was inspiring to hear that.
Perhaps social media might actually be counterproductive instead of... It's very great at connecting people, don't get me wrong, but it seems to me that it can be almost more harmful than it is helpful in many cases.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there were so many different directions that we could go with this talk. We could be here for days, actually, but that is actually one of them. I mean, now I don't have the study because I didn't bring them all, but it's proven the more time people spend online connecting, the lonelier they feel. It's not really connecting. Human beings are like flesh and blood beings. So if your relationship is through a screen all the time, now if you have a flesh and blood connecting in the space relationship and then you drop a little note to each other, that's one thing. But if your whole relationship is built on that, or this fixation, you don't see the people around you at all. You don't feel the people around you at all. So yeah, I think it's a big problem. And it's a tool too. It's useful, and it's also really harmful, depending on how it's used. That's enough said about that, but yeah. One more? Yeah.
So the Buddha,
Hold on.
when discussing the three refuges, was asked. The Buddha, when discussing the three refuges, was asked which is the most important, and I believe, from what I've heard, it was refuge in the Sangha. How do you feel that this kind of references that sense of belonging, and how that might be associated?
Well, it's a good question. Technically, what he was referring to was actually refuge in the spiritual friend, i.e. the teacher. But the way the Buddha set up the whole monastic community was that in order to grow spiritually, you live in community. We have the image of the monks meditating up in the mountains, and it's quite a lovely image. They don't ever talk about the nuns meditating in the mountains, but there are. But the capacity to spend time in a cave in the mountain, generally speaking, is generated from having that training in community. And even from the time of his enlightenment, the Buddha said, my community would be fully ordained monks, fully ordained nuns, lay men and lay women. So even that sense of community, or of the spiritual practice being held by a group of people, was among the first part of his teaching. The Buddha also was very practical. He gave lots and lots and lots of teachings for how people can live in harmony, how people can live together in a way that supports everyone. So, it's a reliance, relying on each other. I would say that that's very much a part of Buddhism. It's very much a part of every spiritual movement. And His Holiness is very, very much one of his highest priorities, top 3 priorities, is to bring what he calls basic human values. He says, religion in this world these days, he has some numbers, and I can't remember what they are, but roughly, it's like there's 7 billion people on the planet, although I just read there's something more like 8. Anyway, that maybe 1 billion of them are religious people. A whole lot of them are not. But religion or no, these basic human values of respect for others, kindness towards others, caring for people, wishing to care for others in the same way we want to be cared for, those, he says, are completely universal. And that they don't need to be taught in connection with religion. that if we really teach these as ways human beings can live together, and look at this as a commonality across religions, across nations, across peoples, and see that we have at root this in common. That training, especially starting very young, training people to live by those basic human values is, I think it's his mission to save the planet. Really, really. So yeah, it's knowing that we are in community. And wishing to benefit others, making that the mission of our life. And I think that's what I'd like for us to leave with. This thought that human beings want to be involved, as part of this belonging. We want to be involved in a cause bigger than ourselves, something larger. Our family, our football team, and that's what causes people to go join ISIS, for goodness sake, they say, something bigger than myself. But we can adopt a cause bigger than myself is to create a sense of belonging for everybody on this planet. If that's my mission every day, then I've got work to do. I have a reason to get out of bed every morning. My every interaction is filled then with some sense of purpose. And I grow and also feel connected with others at the same time. Why not? I'm from the generation that thought we could save the world. And then I think a lot of us got quite disillusioned. And now I'm back to, not only can we must. We must. We can. One person at a time, one little interaction at a time, but we can do it. And we must. So, thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Venerable Tony.